The last 10 years have been a disaster for regular people in America. Prices continue to rise and make it almost impossible to get ahead. Rent continues to go up, but our wages don't pace with it. When I was 18 years old, I was able to rent a 2-bedroom apartment on my own on a GameStop salary. I paid $600 a month. I recently looked up the same townhouse to see what the asking price for rent was today. The last time I had it listed was for $1,700. That's a little over 183% increase for that same townhouse. The interior looked the same, brown carpet and wood cabinets from the 80s. Now, I rented this place 15 years ago, but nothing has changed with the interior. The small town is relatively the same size. Minimum wage back then was $7.25 at the time in Nevada, and now it's $12 an hour. It seems like the goal line moves every few years to keep you on the treadmill, with no end in sight when the average person can get ahead. I crossed the $100,000 a year income in 2022. Before I was even close to that number, I felt like if I even made over $70,000 a year, I would be set. But by the time I passed the 100K mark, everything just got way more expensive. My rent in 2023 was $2,100 a month, and this was for a small studio apartment that I had to share with cockroaches. I would get them every other month and would have to have pest control come. It was not fancy at all, an older building from the 60s in Los Angeles. And for that, I was spending nearly 40% of my take-home pay just to live there and pay rent. That didn't include utilities, food, and other basic necessities. My standard of living had only slightly changed. Most of my money still went to living expenses. I was just living in a bigger city and could afford my hobbies a little more easily. I was 31 years old, sitting in my apartment with little to show for all the hard work I was doing. My apartment wasn't filled with expensive stuff either. I'm pretty simple and can get by with just the basics. I had a cheap Amazon bed and a desk and a chair in the corner. No TV, nothing fancy. I was happy, but would constantly return to the thought of, why am I working here this hard so 50% of my income can go just to living in a small studio apartment in Los Angeles? My savings and investment accounts were small and growing, but at a much slower rate than I would like it to. I've always read business books about people who started from nothing, like The Gambler, about Kirk Kerkorian, who went from being penniless to owning half the hotels on the Vegas Strip, to more modern stories like The 4-Hour Workweek. But both of these stories have wildly different visions of a success story. But what I took from both of them is they are two stories of people doing what they want to do. Bob Dylan once said that a man is a success if he gets up in the morning and goes to bed at night, and in between, he does what he wants to do. And that's where my thoughts started to wonder. Was spending more than half of my income to live in a small studio apartment, was this what I wanted to do? It wasn't. I read that book 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss in 2020 when everyone was cooped up and we couldn't leave the house. I had already been working remotely for 3 years, but most companies were now used to that remote work being the norm by 2021. My job at the time was really open to people living wherever they want, as long as we were able to do the job on time. Someone at my company did just that. She moved to Korea at the beginning of 2022, and it got my gears turning. If someone else working here could do that, why couldn't I? I planned a month-long trip to Thailand and was going to work a week while I was there before taking an additional 3 weeks off just to test if I could even do it. And to no surprise, I could. And I loved it. I hadn't been this excited in a long time for something new. It wasn't about Thailand being cheaper. That's not why I did it. I wasn't looking a way to cut my expenses and just game the system. What that trip showed me was that America has just gotten too expensive to live the life that I actually wanted to live. That was my realization. I would have stayed and paid for it if it made sense, if I was getting something out of being in Los Angeles. But I was paying $2,100 a month to share a room with cockroaches. And at some point that stops being a cost of living and just starts being a bad deal. My 2023 goal was now to make the move to Thailand. I did not tell anyone, and I just planned this in silence. I started selling some of my stuff mid-year, and I worked on the visa plan. By the end of October, it was time to make the move. I decided to actually go to Peru first for 2 months. I booked an Airbnb in Lima, Peru, and I left with only a carry-on suitcase and a handbag. The reason why I went to Peru first was to ease into it. I was basically in the same time zone as California, and I would drop the news to my boss when I was already there. Thinking back, I probably should have asked first, but I've always been a fan of going for it, then asking for forgiveness later. And if the conversation didn't go as planned, then I would just come back to America or figure something else out. And I do want to say, I don't recommend this approach. I was close with my boss, and I had a really good feeling about it that he wouldn't mind. I have a friend who tried moving abroad before I did without telling the company that he worked for, but he got laid off during the layover while he was visiting his family in Australia. If you're not close with the owner or at a small company, you should ask before making a move this big. You don't want your plans ruined before they even start. In Peru, it wasn't all smooth sailing either. I got my wallet pickpocketed while in Cusco while I was visiting Machu Picchu over the Thanksgiving weekend. It was in a zip jacket pocket, and they still got to it. Traveling alone can be risky. Luckily, I kept a second credit card in the safe back at my hotel, so I wasn't completely stranded. That was a moment that I started to second guess the whole thing. Maybe this was a sign that I should go back to California and forget about this whole idea. But I didn't. I finished out the 2 months in Peru and got on a plane to Thailand. When I finally made it to Thailand, everything really did just align. I rented an Airbnb for 6 months before transitioning to a year lease after I got a long stay visa approved. Really, the only downside that I have right now is I'm still working nights from here, but I still wouldn't trade it for my old life in California. At least, not as of yet. I plan on making a lot more videos about living abroad and me working towards leaving my 9 to 5. I'm not an expert at this, and I'm also figuring it out along the way. That's it for this video, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.